Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Gemma and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in September. And so in September I had a pretty good reading month. I read 14 books and DNF'd one, but a lot of them were short because it was shorty September. So yeah, take those numbers with a pinch of very small bookness. And yeah, let's just get into the books. I actually had a really excellent reading month. I had a lot of 4.5 and 5-star reads, 2 4.5 stars, 4 5 stars. So I have some excellent books here to talk to you about. I'm really excited. Yeah, as always, I want to know your thoughts. Have you read these books? What were your thoughts? Have I convinced you to read any of them? I really hope so. Because yeah, we got some corkers. So we'll start at the bottom with the DNF, as always. And I DNF'd The Pleasure Marriage by Tahar ben Jelloun, which was translated by Rita Nezami, I believe, from the Arabic. And this one was about a guy in Morocco who is married, has children, but he goes away for work to Senegal, I believe. And when he's there, he has a pleasure wife for like 3 months of the year. They sign a contract, and then you can imagine the part of the marriage that they focus on. And then he decides to bring her into his family as a second wife. And it's about that. And I was quite interested in that part of it. And the beginning of the book, the setup for that section, I thought was really interesting. But then it started going down like a weird magical realism route that just wasn't my jam at all. And so I stopped reading that about 30% in. Yeah, it was just, I just wasn't feeling that vibe. So unfortunately that was a DNF. Then I do have a 2-star read from the month, and that was Siddhartha by Herman Hesse, which is a very famous classic book. Also translated from the German, though I'm not sure which translation I read. I read an audio version on Everand, and it doesn't tell you who the translator was in like the show notes, so I'm not sure, but I do think that was an issue for me in this book. I thought the use of certain words was not great, which I can only assume would be a translation issue. But to be honest, the whole story I thought was a bit average. It had almost fairy tale vibes about a young Indian boy who decides to pursue a life of spirituality. So he leaves his family and goes off and does his spiritual thing. But yeah, it just, I don't know, it kind of lacked substance and character for me. It was really short, and it just didn't pack any sort of punch at all. I am aware that it is a classic, but I still expect my classics to give me a level of character. I would say it was quite plotty, but I had absolutely no connection with Siddhartha as a character at all. So yeah, that was a bit of a flop for me. Wouldn't recommend. Then we move into 3-star territory, and I have So Late in the Day by Claire Keegan. This is a short story. Claire Keegan writes short fiction, and I've read several of her other works, and this one was fine. I'll be honest, most of Claire Keegan's work, I have that sort of general opinion. I think they're fine. Nice writing, fine story, looking at a moral issue or a human issue. And in this one we have a guy who is sort of reflecting on a lost love. And like I say, it was fine. I've kind of forgotten all of it at this point, so it's clearly hasn't stuck with me. So yeah, it has absolutely no impact on my reading life, I would say. Then I have Women and Power by Mary Beard, which is a non-fiction. Again, very short. This is 2 speeches or lectures, effectively, that Mary Beard gave on women and power. And it's obviously, what's the word for when you take the spoken word and put it into words? It will come to me. Anyway, and if you're unfamiliar, Mary Beard is a pretty famous historian, and she focuses on ancient Greek and ancient Roman history. And so there are a lot of references within, particularly her first lecture essay to the ancient world and how things possibly haven't changed much since then, and drawing parallels between the two. And then the second one, she very much talks more about sort of the power side, and she brings some American politics and that sort of thing into it. I didn't agree with Mary Beard on some of her points, and so I only gave it a 3-star. I think it's an interesting read. I think it's an interesting topic to discuss and debate, but there's also a part of me that thinks we can sit there as women and whinge about all the things that are wrong, or we can focus on how do we move things forward, how do we progress from the situation that we're in, rather than saying, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is another example of where women have been treated badly, and another example of where women have been treated badly. I understand that. Obviously I'm a woman, I experience that. I work in a male-dominated industry. I get it. I totally get it. But what can we do to make that not a problem anymore? Let's stop harping on about all the feminism issues and look at a way forward. And so I found that it grated on me a little bit for that reason. Though she did very much talk about, particularly in her second one, about how women should be lifting up other women, and yes, absolutely, I completely agree with that. So there were things that I agreed with her on, but I just felt like it was quite a negative approach to feminism, and I'm not really there for that. I'm all about positive vibes. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that one. Then we move into 3.5-star territory, and I have Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey, which is the 6th book in the Expanse series, and I read this with Sandy from His Reads A Lot, Sarah from Freshly Read Books, and Fraser from Fraser Simon's Springboard Thought, and we have read this whole series together and we are having a blast. However, this is absolutely my least favourite of the 6 that I've read to date. I think it's probably not helped by the fact that books 4 and 5 were fantastic. I really loved them. And then this one just didn't hit that same level. It very much felt like a filler book to me. It serves a purpose in that it got all of our characters from one point to another, and I think that will be a good taking off position for the final 3 books. But ultimately it didn't float my boat. If you are unfamiliar, the Expanse series is a epic sci-fi saga where we are following the crew of a ship, the Retinanti, and we follow various characters throughout. There's different characters being followed in all of the books, and there is a proto-molecule that has been sort of released into civilization, which is an intelligent virus, maybe? I don't know, we don't really know what it is. It's a prayer molecule. And so the crew of the Retinanti are embroiled in this from the start, and we sort of see how that affects the politics of different planets and governments, and how it affects obviously the crew. In this one we had so many different perspectives, so many, and some that we would only see once, some that we would see several times, some that we were quite familiar with, others that we weren't familiar with at all, and it was just too jumpy for me. At the beginning I quite liked it, but it just became untenable the further the book went on for me. So yes, unfortunately this one didn't work as well for me, but there were obviously parts of the plot that I was super interested in because it is driving the key narrative forward, but we will see how that translates in book 7. But I'm still absolutely committed to reading the rest of this series. I just thought this was the weakest book of the series so far. Okay, and now we're into 4-star territories. So we have 10 books that were 4-star or above, which I think is pretty good. And in at number 10, we have Tell No One by Harlen Coban, which is a crime mystery thriller, which is not often featured on this channel, but it is on the scratch list. The scratch list is just over here. Look. And so in this, we're following a guy whose wife is murdered at the beginning of the book. They're on a lake. They get attacked, he gets knocked out, she gets murdered. And then we move to 8 years in the future when he receives a somewhat odd email, possibly from his dead wife. Dun dun dun. And then it goes from there and we find out what really happened that night. Is she dead? Is she not dead? If she is dead, who killed her? If she's not dead, why is she not dead, and where has she been for 8 years? So all of these questions, and it's like this twisty turny plot, and it was a lot of fun and kept me engaged all the way through. So if you are into that sort of book, and you just want a fun plotty ride, then I would recommend Tell No One was a fun book to read. In at number 9 we have The Crane Husband by Kelly Barnhill. This was a weird one, and weird doesn't usually feature very highly in my rankings, but there was something about Kelly Barnhill's writing style that really drew me into this. This is narrated by a young girl whose father has died, and she is pretty much running the household at this point. Her mother is an artist, so brings some money in with her art, but she's doing everything. She's marketing all her mother's art, she's looking after her younger brother, she's buying all the food, cooking all the food. She is very much the head of the household. And then one day her mother brings home a crane man, a man that looks like a crane. And apparently that's not weird at all. And this crane lives with them, and it turns out he's not a very nice crane. It's very bizarre. It's clearly drawing on some sort of mythology, fairy tale-esque stories. But I found the narrator, the young girl, really, really engaging, and you just really wanted to know what happened next. So yeah, I enjoyed it, and it was a shorty. So yeah, I would recommend. And the audio is on Everand, so if you have that, you can check it out. If you don't have Everand, I do leave a link below for you to get a free month and me to get a free month if you want to try it out. So that link is there for you if you want to partake. In at number 8, and another shock entry, we have the Secret Life of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw. And this is a collection of short stories. If you've been here before, you'll know I vehemently detest short stories. But everyone said this was the one, like, this is a really good short story collection. If you don't like this, like, this is one that's going to change your mind. And it was my pick for the Ben Reads Good challenge in September. Ben himself recommended this, which is not always a good thing for me. I think I have about 50-50 hit rate with books that Ben loves. But I did really enjoy this one. It tells the story of lots of different women in America who are somehow linked to the church, and it's about sort of their life and the things that are going on, quite often related to men or partners of some description. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I really felt like I connected with each lead narrator in each story. I thought it was a really nice sort of slice of life approach, and yeah, I thought it was really good. So yeah, I would recommend, and I would say my mind was changed a little bit on short stories with this. So a good one. Next up I have There by Tommy Orange. So this was a really interesting book. So we follow lots of different characters in this book. Every chapter is narrated by a different person, and there are lots of narrators. Some of them we have more than once, some of them not. But because some of them are quite short chapters, so it's quite choppy in approach, but I felt that worked quite well for this. We are in Oakland, California, and I should probably say Tommy Orange is an Indigenous author, and this is an Indigenous story. So we're in Oakland, and the big Oakland powwow is being arranged, which is sort of like a big Indigenous festival with dancers and sort of like dance contests and music and food and all of that jazz. And we know pretty early on that something significant and tragic happens at that powwow, and so we're just leading up to that moment throughout most of the book, and you see how all these different characters come together to create this situation, this explosive situation at the end. And it was just really cleverly written. It was really interesting to have the perspectives of so many different people that were involved, and it's difficult to say too much without spoiling it, because yeah, I can't really, but yeah, the different perspectives of different sides of things was really fascinating. And this was Tommy Orange's first novel. He has a second novel out this year called Wandering Stars, which is actually a prequel and a sequel to There. So I think the book is split into two parts, one prior to the events of There and one after the events of There, which has some of the characters from There. How many times can I say there in this review? There. So yeah, I'm really, really keen to get to that one. I do have it on my Kindle, and it was longlisted for the book of this year. So yeah, I will get to it at some point. Then still on 4.5 stars, we have Saga Volume 11, which is the last published volume of Saga by Brian K. Vaughn and illustrated by Fiona Staples. I have waxed lyrical about this graphic novel series for a very long time, and it's sci-fi. We're following a family who the father is from one species, the mother is from another species, and those species are on opposite sides of a war. They have a child, Hazel, who has characteristics from both parents, so wings from her mother and horns from her father, and so she is a hunted child because she should not exist. And Hazel narrates the whole story, and we follow this family as they try to escape persecution from both sides, and we meet allies along the way and enemies along the way, and enemies that become allies and allies that become enemies, and it is just a fantastic story. And Hazel as a narrator is brilliant, and now that we're in volume 11, Hazel is a lot older, or she's sort of like early teens, and it's just really interesting to see her perspective changing a little bit. There is a little bit of omniscient narrator in it where she's narrating from the future, but you can see how her actions are changing, particularly in the last few novels, and yeah, I absolutely love it. The next one is due out, I think, April next year, volume 12, so I'm very excited for that because these are a blast. Okay, in at number 5, we're still on 4.5 star territory, and we have Little Rot by Akwaeke and Emezi. I did do a solo review for this, part of my Hot or Not series, so I will leave that below for you if you want to check it out. But this is another break from what Emezi's usual style is. I don't think Emezi really has a usual style at this point. They tend to write in all genres, and this one is very dark, very, very dark. We follow a cast of characters in sort of like the dark underworld of Lagos, and at the beginning one of the narrators, one of the main characters, punches somebody at a sex party, and it turns out that person is very, very powerful, and that causes issues and repercussions that we then explore throughout the rest of the book. It is extremely dark. It covers very sensitive issues, particularly I would say at the beginning of the book there's a lot of exploration of the sex world in Lagos, and it is extremely uncomfortable to read in places. So if that is not your jam, then don't pick this up. But if you do enjoy exploring darker subjects and things that are quite frankly harrowing, then this is an excellent book. It was super plotty. It kept me reading to the end. The characters were really interesting. The way that Emezi writes characters is just fantastic. She really knows how to create a morally grey character that you are rooting for. So yeah, highly recommend if you can deal with all the trigger warnings. Great book, and I'll leave my full review linked below for you. Okay, now we move into 5-star territory. So exciting. And in at 4th place we have And Every Morning the Walk Home Gets Longer and Longer, which is by Fredrik Backman and translated by Alice Menzies. So Backman is a Swedish author, and I have read a couple of his books before, and this is a teeny tiny novella, and it is about a grandfather and his grandson, as his grandfather is losing his memory and his cognitive function, and it's so heartbreaking. It is, I did cry. But it's also full of love and hope and what family is. Oh, it's making me feel a bit emotional just talking about it. But yeah, if you need a good cry, but in a sort of, it's very sad, but in a loving family environment, then yeah, give this one a go. It was, yeah, very good, very good. Then in at number 3, I have The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. So this is my 4th Agatha Christie book, and it's the only one that I've given 5 stars to, though I have given them all high ratings. But this one was just so much fun, and I think I was just really in the mood for a cosy murder mystery. And Agatha Christie is clearly the queen of that. So we are following Poirot. It is sort of towards the end of his career. Poirot is the investigator, if you like, if you are unaware of Agatha Christie. And he is sort of he's retired, and of course the town that he ends up retiring in, there is a murder that needs solving, and he gets brought into this case where Roger Ackroyd has been murdered in his study with a locked door, and yeah, interesting. And it is narrated by another man that lives in the village, who almost takes the place of Hastings as his assistant in this novel. So I'm not going to go too much into detail, because that's the fun of an Agatha Christie. The less you know, the better. But I will say that I did not guess the murderer. I think I changed my mind on who I thought the murderer was every chapter. Every chapter that I read, I was like, actually, no, I think it's this person. Actually, no, I think it's this person. Ultimately, I was wrong. I was just wrong. I'm not good at figuring this stuff out, so so there we go. But it was a fun ride, and it was exactly the kind of book that I was in the mood for. So yes, loved it. In second position, I have the book that I picked up for Straya September, which was Women and Children by Tony Birch. Tony Birch is an Indigenous Australian author. I read him for the first time last year. I read his book The White Girl and loved it. And I was like, how have I never heard of this author before? Like, I've been missing out. And so I picked up another Tony Birch this Straya September. Women and Children is his newest novel. It doesn't focus on Indigenous culture. This one is looking at a family, and the children go to a very Christian school where there is some abuse. And it's really just a look at family life, and it looks at lots of different things. But I would say one of the key themes is domestic violence, and also like the relationship between a grandfather and a grandson. So obviously I was in the mood for that because I had the Backman as well. But that relationship between the grandfather and the grandson is what made this book 5 stars for me. I just loved them together. This old man retired, his wife has died, and it's the summer holidays, and this kid is just coming over, they're doing their thing, they're going to the scrapyard, they're clearing out the garden, and it was wholesome, and it felt realistic, and it was just lovely. It was just lovely. Obviously we have this darker side of the domestic violence plot going alongside it, which I guess raises the stakes for this story, but I ummed and ahed about what rating to give this, because I think objectively this is not a 5-star read, but I was so connected to the characters that I felt like I couldn't give it anything other than 5 stars. So yeah, but if you have not checked out Tony Birch, I'm telling you, you're missing out. You are missing out. I cannot wait to read more of his backlist. He is an exquisite author, and yeah, I think he is my favourite Australian author. Brilliant guy. Brilliant. And that leads me to my number 1 book for September, and that was And So I Roar by Abby Dare. So this was the sequel to The Girl with the Louding Voice, which is a book that follows a young girl in Nigeria, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's Nigeria. And she is sort of sold off by her father in the first book to be a third wife to an old, horrible man. And we see her fighting for freedom, her right to education, and her right to pursue a career of her choice. And the first book was just brilliant. There is a lot of dialect in it, but I felt that really added to the experience. It wasn't difficult to understand once you get into the flow. The dialect it really adds authenticity and a sense of place and culture to the book that I think elevates it. And So I Roar is a direct continuation of the first book, so I can't tell you so much about it. But it is dual perspective this time. We follow a Dunny and a woman who is involved in the first book. And we see her continue basically to fight for her right to education. It brings in some themes around climate and sort of agricultural support in Africa, which I was particularly interested in as someone who works in agriculture. And we meet other characters in this book who have come from different areas of Africa and have different challenges. There was one character in particular whose story arc was very important, and I thought it was really well done by Dare. I can't tell you too much because it happens quite close to the end of the book, so I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, and this sort of juxtaposition that there is between people who live in the smaller villages and the people who live in the cities was really interesting to explore as well. So yes, I absolutely loved it. So if you loved The Girl with the Loud Voice and you're like eyeing up And So I Roar, because it's the next one, you will not be disappointed. It was absolutely exquisite. And I'm delighted. I'm delighted that Abby Dare has come out with another book this year, and now I just want more. I want more. So yes. So that was all of the books that I read in September. As you can tell, I'm pretty happy with how that went. I'd love to know what were your favourite books of the month, and what were your least favourite. Did you DNF any? If you made it to the end of this video but you do not want to leave a comment, then leave me a lion emoji for And So I Roar. So original. If you are interested in seeing the books I'm planning to read for October, I will leave both my Victober TBR and my October TBR here for you to check out, and I'll see you all very soon with another one. Bye guys!